A young mother arrives in a frontier town with twin babies and a stack of letters promising her a new beginning, only to discover that her intended husband wants nothing to do with children he didn't know existed. But in this harsh landscape, where most see only burden, one man healing from his own loss recognizes the strength it takes to journey across a continent for the chance at a better life. This is a story about finding family in unexpected places and how the heart's capacity to love can be measured not by what we planned, but by what we're brave enough to embrace. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Dakota Territory went a bit hard as the stagecoach rolled into Riverdale, snow swirling around its wheels like dancing ghosts of forgotten promises. Inside, Emma Mitchell clutched her 6-month-old twins closer, trying to shield them from the chill that seeped through the coach's wooden frame. Little Sarah fussed against her shoulder while James slept, his tiny face peaceful despite the jostling of the rough road. "Almost there, my loves," Emma whispered, pressing a kiss to Sarah's downy head. At 24, Emma had already weathered more storms than most twice her age. The war had taken her brother, illness had claimed her parents, and James Mitchell, Sr., her husband of barely a year, had been crushed in a factory accident 3 months before the twins were born. Left alone in Philadelphia with mounting debts and no family to turn to, Emma had made the hardest decision of her life. The newspaper advertisement still felt crisp in her memory, though the actual clipping was worn thin from constant handling. Established businessman seeks respectable Eastern widow for marriage. Position offers stability and good standing in growing township. Mime, after weeks of correspondence, Oliver Harper's letters had convinced her that Riverdale could offer her children the future Philadelphia couldn't. Fresh air instead of factory smoke, open spaces instead of crowded tenements, and most importantly, a father figure who had written of his eagerness to provide for a ready-made family. Emma had sold everything except her wedding band, her mother's silver hairbrush, and what clothing and necessities she could pack in one trunk to fund the journey west. The rest of her small inheritance had purchased passage for her and the ABC twins on the Northern Pacific Railroad as far as Bismarck, then the stagecoach to Riverdale. Oliver's last letter, tucked securely in her coat pocket alongside the others, had promised he would meet her at the stagecoach stop. Riverdale. Final. "Stop!" the driver called, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. Emma adjusted her threadbare wool coat and gathered Sarah more securely in her left arm while balancing James in her right. How she would manage to disembark with both babies and retrieve her trunk was a puzzle she hadn't yet solved when the stagecoach door swung open. "Need a hand, ma'am?" The driver, a grizzled man with a frost-covered beard, peered inside. His weathered face softened at the sight of the twins. "Got your hands full there, I see." "Thank you, yes," Emma replied, grateful for the assistance as she carefully passed Sarah to him, then stepped down into the snow, which immediately soaked through her thin-soled boots. The chill that shot up her legs made her gasp, but she forced a smile as she reclaimed her daughter. The stagecoach stop consisted of little more than a wood platform adjacent to Riverdale's main street, a single dirt thoroughfare lined with wooden buildings. A general store with peeling paint, a small church whose steeple stood straight despite the harsh winters it had endured, a saloon with rough-looking men huddled around its entrance for warmth, and at the far end, a 2-story building with a sign identifying it as Harper's Mercantile and Dry Goods. Emma's heart leapt. Oliver Harper's business, the foundation of the security he'd promised in his letters. She scanned the small crowd that had gathered at the stagecoach's arrival, searching for the man who had described himself as 42 years of age, of average height, with brown hair graying respectably at the temples, and a demeanor befitting a businessman of standing. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emma turned, hope rising in her chest despite her exhaustion. A tall man approached, well-dressed in a wool coat that spoke of prosperity. His hair was indeed brown with silver at the temples, and his clean-shaven face might have been handsome if not for the deepening frown as his gaze moved from her face to the infants in her arms. "Mr. Harper?" she asked, shifting Sarah higher on her shoulder as the baby began to cry from the cold. Oliver Harper, yes. His voice was clipped, nothing like the warm, inviting tone she'd imagined while reading his letters. He made no move to assist her or greet her properly. Instead, he stood stiffly, his eyes now fixed on the twins with unmistakable dismay. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "I apologize for Sarah's crying. The journey has been long, and they're both cold and hungry." "You didn't mention children in your letters," Oliver said flatly. "Not once." Emma blinked in confusion. "I most certainly did. In my second letter, I explained that I was recently widowed with infant twins. I was explicit about needing a fresh start for my small family. I received no such information." His tone suggested he believed she had deliberately deceived him. "I agreed to marry a widow, Mrs. Mitchell, not to take responsibility for another man's offspring." The stagecoach driver, who had been unloading her trunk, paused at the harsh words. Nearby conversations quieted as townsfolk turned to observe the uncomfortable exchange. "There must be some mistake," Emma insisted, though doubt began to creep in. Had the letter explaining her children somehow gone astray? "I would never have undertaken such a journey without being forthright about my circumstances." Oliver Harper shook his head, taking a step backward as though to distance himself physically from the situation. "Mistake or deliberate omission, the result is the same. I have no interest in raising another man's children. I sought a wife to manage my household and present a respectable image for my business, not to inherit a ready-made family." Emma felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. The babies, sensing her distress, both began crying in earnest now. "What am I to do, then?" she asked, struggling to maintain her composure as curious onlookers gathered. "I've spent everything I had to come here." "That's hardly my concern," Harper replied, though a flicker of discomfort crossed his face at the attention they were drawing. He lowered his voice. "There's a small hotel down the street. I'll pay for 2 nights' lodging. After that, you'll need to make other arrangements." Before Emma could respond, a woman pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. Middle-aged, with grey-streaked dark hair and a practical woolen dress beneath her heavy coat, she approached with concern etched on her kind face. "Everything all right here, Oliver?" she asked, though her gaze was fixed on Emma and the distressed twins. "A misunderstanding, Mrs. Winters," Harper replied stiffly. "Mrs. Mitchell failed to mention certain complications in our correspondence." Mrs. Winters' eyes narrowed slightly at Harper's tone, but her expression remained polite. "I see." She turned to Emma, her face softening. "Those little ones are near frozen, poor things. The hotel's not fit for babies. Drafty old place. I'm Ruth Winters. I run the boarding house just up the street. We have a room that would suit you, and the little ones better." Emma's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you, but I'm afraid I have limited funds for lodging." "We can discuss that later," Ruth said firmly. "Right now, those babies need warmth, and I'd wager you could use a hot meal yourself." Oliver Harper cleared his throat. "As I was saying, I'll cover 2 nights' lodging." "That's very generous of you, Oliver," Ruth interrupted, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I'm sure your conscience is much relieved." She turned back to Emma. "Come along, dear. My son can bring your trunk." Emma found herself following Ruth Winters away from the stagecoach stop, away from Oliver Harper and his broken promises, and toward an uncertain future in a town where she knew no one. The twins' cries had subsided to whimpers, small puffs of breath visible in the cold air. Ruth's boarding house was a large two-story structure, with a wide porch and windows glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. Inside, the entryway opened to a comfortable sitting room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. The smell of stew and fresh bread filled the air, making Emma's stomach clench with hunger. "Ethan!" Ruth called. "Come help with this lady's trunk." A young man of perhaps 17 appeared from a back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He took in the scene, Emma with the twins, his mother's determined expression, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Is it still at the stage?" "Right where that fool Harper left it," Ruth confirmed, helping Emma remove her coat, while somehow managing to support her arm that held little James. After Ethan departed, Ruth guided Emma to a rocking chair near the fire. "Now then, let me hold one of these little angels while you warm up." Too exhausted to protest, Emma surrendered Sarah to the older woman's capable hands. Ruth cooed to the baby, while expertly checking her for any signs of cold exposure. "They seem healthy despite the journey," Ruth pronounced. "How old?" 6 months next week," Emma replied, relaxing incrementally in the chair's gentle motion and the room's blessed warmth. "They were born early and small, but they've grown well." Ruth nodded approvingly. "And their names?" "Sarah and James." Emma's voice caught. "After my husband. He died before they were born." Understanding filled Ruth's eyes. "And so you answered Oliver Harper's advertisement?" "Yes." Emma didn't elaborate further. The humiliation of her reception was still too raw. Ruth's expression hardened briefly. "Harper's a prominent businessman here, but he's always been more concerned with appearances than substance. I should have guessed his sudden interest in finding an Eastern bride had more to do with impressing his business associates than genuine companionship." The front door opened, bringing a blast of cold air as Ethan returned with Emma's trunk. Another figure followed him inside, a tall man in a heavy coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Back so soon, Daniel?" Ruth asked. "I thought that Thompson's boy was laid up with that fever." "His fever broke," the man replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair threaded with silver and a face lined by time and weather, yet handsome in its strong features. His eyes, a deep blue that reminded Emma of summer skies, moved from Ruth to Emma and the babies with undisguised curiosity. "Dr. Daniel Winters," Ruth said by way of introduction. "My brother-in-law. Daniel, this is Mrs. Emma Mitchell and her twins, Sarah and James. They've had quite the welcome to Riverdale, I'm afraid." Dr. Winters hung his coat on a peg by the door, approaching with a practiced eye that seemed to take in Emma's pale exhaustion and the baby's condition in one sweeping glance. "Mrs. Mitchell was Oliver Harper's intended," Ruth continued, her tone conveying volumes. "Was?" Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Harper was unprepared for children," Emma said quietly, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes, followed by something that might have been anger, quickly masked. "I see." He moved closer, bending slightly to observe, James in Emma's arms. "May I? Traveling can be hard on little ones." Emma nodded, allowing the doctor to examine her son with gentle, competent hands. His touch was professional, yet somehow comforting, as he checked the baby's lungs, temperature, and reflexes. "Healthy little fellow," he pronounced, then repeated the examination with Sarah, who had calmed in Ruth's arms. "Both seem no worse for the journey, though I'd recommend plenty of warmth, rest, and regular feeding to help them recover." "Thank you, Doctor," Emma said, relaxing slightly at his assessment. "Daniel delivered half the children in this territory," Ruth said with obvious pride, "including my Ethan, though that was some time ago." Dr. Winters smiled briefly at this, the expression transforming his serious face into something unexpectedly warm. Ruth exaggerates, though I will say these two are fine specimens considering their journey. You must have taken excellent care of them under difficult circumstances, Mrs. Mitchell. The simple acknowledgement of her efforts, something no one had offered since she'd been widowed, brought a fresh wave of emotion that Emma struggled to contain. She blinked rapidly, focusing on James's tiny fingers wrapped around her own. "Now then," Ruth said briskly, perhaps sensing Emma's fragile composure. "Ethan, take Mrs. Mitchell's trunk up to the blue room. Daniel, you'll stay for supper." "I hadn't planned to," the doctor began, then glanced at Emma again. Something in her expression, or perhaps the twins' presence, seemed to change his mind. "But I suppose my other patients can wait a bit longer." As Ethan carried her trunk upstairs and Ruth disappeared to the kitchen, with Sarah still contentedly cradled in her arms, Emma found herself alone with Dr. Winters. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with unasked questions. "I apologize for intruding on your family's hospitality," Emma finally said. "Once I've rested, I'll make arrangements to move on." Dr. Winters studied her with those perceptive blue eyes. "Move on to where, Mrs. Mitchell?" The simple question laid bare the precariousness of her situation. Emma had no answer that didn't reveal the complete desperation of her circumstances. Before she could formulate a response that preserved some dignity, James began to fuss, his small face scrunching in hunger. "May I hold him while you prepare whatever he needs?" Dr. Winters offered, extending his hands with a confidence that spoke of experience. Surprised, Emma handed James to him. Most men she'd known, including her late husband, had been hesitant with infants, especially fussy ones. But Dr. Winters held James with practiced ease, speaking to him in low, soothing tones, while Emma retrieved a prepared bottle from her travel bag. "You seem comfortable with babies," she observed, as she tested the milk's temperature on her wrist. A shadow passed over his face. "I had a son and a daughter." He offered no further explanation, but the past tense told Emma all she needed to. "No, I'm sorry," she said simply, understanding the magnitude of such loss. He nodded once in acknowledgement, then watched as she fed James. "Riverdale needs families, Mrs. Mitchell. The Dakota Territory is hard on those who face it alone." "As I'm discovering," Emma replied with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps Oliver Harper's short-sightedness might prove fortunate for someone else in our community," Dr. Winters said carefully. "Someone who understands the value of what he so carelessly rejected." Before Emma could interpret this cryptic statement, Ruth returned with Sarah, who was now happily gumming a wooden teething ring. "Supper's nearly ready," she announced. "I've had Ethan prepare warm water for a bath for the little ones afterward. Nothing improves a trying day like clean babies and a full stomach." As Emma followed Ruth to the dining room, she felt Dr. Winters' gaze follow her. For the first time since arriving in Riverdale, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, this wasn't the end of her journey, but rather an unexpected detour on the path to the home she sought. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the blue wallpaper of the boarding house. "Room?" Emma woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was, until the twins' soft breathing beside her brought reality rushing back. The events of yesterday, the humiliating rejection, Ruth Winters' kindness, the doctor's thoughtful gaze, all settled over her like the patchwork quilt covering her bed. The twins still slept, exhausted from their journey. Emma slipped quietly from bed, washing her face in the porcelain basin and changing into her second-best dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite fine. Her reflection in the small mirror revealed dark circles beneath her eyes despite her night's rest. She pinched her cheeks for color and smoothed her honey-brown hair into a simple bun, desperate to present a composed image that belied her inner turmoil. A soft knock at the door interrupted her preparations. Ruth Winters entered carrying a tray, with steaming coffee, fresh bread and preserves. "Thought you might prefer breakfast up here this morning," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "Those little ones still sleeping?" Emma nodded gratefully. "They rarely sleep this long. The journey must have exhausted them. Travel's hard on the smallest ones," Ruth agreed, pouring coffee into a delicate cup. "I've prepared bottles for when they wake. My Ethan found your formula supplies in your trunk. Hope you don't mind." "Of course not. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Winters." Emma hesitated, then voiced the question that had plagued her through the night. "I must ask, what does your brother-in-law charge for medical consultations?" Ruth's eyebrows rose. "Are the babies ill?" "No, but his examination yesterday." "I have little money, but I insist on paying my debts." Ruth's expression softened. "Daniel wouldn't dream of charging for that. He was simply ensuring the twins were well after their journey." Emma's pride bristled despite her gratitude. "I don't seek charity, Mrs. Winters." "And none is being offered," Ruth replied firmly. "Merely neighborliness. Something in short supply from certain quarters of Riverdale, it seems." Her tone made clear she referred to Oliver Harper's rejection. Emma sipped her coffee, gathering courage for her next question. "I must inquire about your rates for lodging as well. Mr. Harper mentioned paying for 2 nights, but—" "Harper sent money around this morning by his shop boy," Ruth interrupted. "Paid for a week, actually, though he included a note saying he'd told you differently." She sniffed disapprovingly. "Trying to pressure you into leaving sooner, I expect. Shame doesn't sit well on some men's shoulders." A week. Emma's mind raced. 7 days to determine her next steps, to find employment or another solution, in the town where her introduction had been public humiliation, where she knew no one except the kind woman before her and the enigmatic doctor who had treated her children with unexpected gentleness. "A week gives you time to consider options," Ruth continued, seemingly reading Emma's thoughts. "Riverdale's growing. There might be opportunities for a capable woman." "I was a teacher before I married," Emma admitted, "though I doubt any school would hire a woman with infant twins." "Perhaps not the school," Ruth acknowledged, "but there are families who might value education for their children, ranchers and farmers whose homesteads lie too far from town for daily attendance." This possibility hadn't occurred to Emma. A flicker of hope kindled in her chest, quickly tempered by practicality. "Even so, I would need accommodation that allows for the twins, and I doubt private tutoring would provide enough for rent and necessities." Ruth hesitated, then spoke carefully. "There is another possibility, though I hesitate to mention it so soon after recent disappointments." Emma steeled herself. "Please, speak plainly. There are men in this territory, respectable, established men, who would value a wife with your qualities. Men who, unlike Oliver Harper, understand that children are a blessing, not a burden." Ruth smoothed her apron unnecessarily. "You needn't rush into anything, of course. A week allows time for proper introductions and considerations." The prospect of another arranged marriage made Emma's stomach clench, but she forced herself to consider it objectively. Her primary responsibility was to her children. If another match offered them security and a proper home, could she refuse based on her own wounded pride? "I appreciate your suggestion," Emma said carefully, "though I confess the thought of presenting myself for approval again is daunting." Ruth reached across the table to pat Emma's hand. "No presentations necessary. Simply join community gatherings. As my guest, attend Sunday services, meet people naturally. Riverdale has good folk, despite your first impression." Before Emma could respond, Sarah began to fuss, her cries quickly escalating, as was her habit. James would soon follow. The twins rarely allowed one to command attention for long. Emma moved to the bed, lifting Sarah and murmuring soothing words while casting an apologetic glance at Ruth. "I'll bring up those bottles," Ruth said, rising, "and perhaps you'd join us downstairs once these little ones are settled. The parlour gets lovely morning light, and my other boarders would welcome the company." After Ruth departed, Emma changed and fed the twins, her mind turning over possibilities. Tutoring might provide some income, but likely not enough. Another marriage could offer stability, but after Harper's rejection, the thought made her chest tighten with anxiety. And beneath these practical concerns lay a deeper fear that she had made a terrible mistake coming to Dakota Territory, risking her children's well-being on promises penned by a stranger. Dressed and composed, Emma carried the twins downstairs an hour later. The boarding house parlour was indeed bathed in morning light, revealing a comfortable room with well-worn furniture and simple but tasteful decorations. Two elderly women sat near the window, knitting and conversing quietly. A middle-aged man, in a railroad uniform, read a newspaper in the corner. All looked up as Emma entered with the twins. "Mrs. Mitchell," Ruth said, emerging from another room. "Allow me to introduce some of my other boarders, Mrs. Eleanor Parsons and Mrs. Judith Whitfield, both widows of railroad men, and Mr. Gerald Hopkins, who works for the Dakota Northern Line." Greetings were exchanged, the women immediately rising to admire the twins. Emma found herself seated in a comfortable chair, Sarah taken by Mrs. Parsons and James by Mrs. Whitfield. Both women cooing and reminiscing about their own children, now grown with families of their own. "Such beautiful babies," Mrs. Whitfield declared. "Look at these eyes, so alert." "And healthy," Mrs. Parsons added. "Not always the case with little ones who've traveled so far." "Dr. Winters examined them yesterday," Ruth explained. "Pronounced them in excellent condition. Daniel Winters is the finest physician in 3 territories," Mrs. Parsons stated with authority. "Trained at Harvard Medical School before coming west. Could have had a prestigious practice back east, but chose to serve where doctors are scarce. After the tragedy, of course," Mrs. Whitfield added softly, then pressed her lips together as if regretting the comment. Emma's curiosity stirred, but before she could inquire further, the front door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Dr. Winters himself. He removed his hat, revealing hair slightly disheveled from the wind, and nodded greetings to the assembled company. "Daniel," Ruth said warmly, "perfect timing. Coffee's fresh." "Actually, I've come on business," he replied, his gaze finding Emma. "Mrs. Mitchell, I wonder if I might speak with you privately." A flutter of apprehension rose in Emma's chest. Had he discovered some concern about the twins after yesterday's examination? Her worry must have shown on her face, for he quickly added, "Nothing regarding your children's health. They seem remarkably resilient." Slightly relieved, but still curious, Emma reclaimed Sarah from Mrs. Parsons, while Ruth took James from Mrs. Whitfield. "My office would give you privacy," Ruth suggested, gesturing toward a small room off the main parlour. Once inside the simply furnished office with Sarah dozing against her shoulder, Emma faced Dr. Winters with as much composure as she could muster. "How may I help you, Doctor?" "It's how I might help you that brings me here," he replied directly. "I understand from Ruth that Harper has provided lodging for a week, but your situation beyond that remains uncertain." Emma stiffened, pride warring. "With practicality, I assure you I'm exploring options." "Of course," he nodded. "But perhaps I might offer one you haven't considered." He hesitated, then continued more carefully. "I find myself in need of assistance with my practice. Someone to maintain records, prepare basic remedies, and assist with patients when appropriate. Your educational background as a teacher suggests you have the necessary skills." Emma blinked in surprise. "You're offering me employment?" "I am," he confirmed. The position includes accommodation. My home adjoins my office and has ample room. The previous doctor's wife designed it for a large family. Something like pain flickered across his face. There and gone so quickly, Emma might have imagined it. That's unexpectedly generous, Emma said cautiously. But I must ask, would the arrangement accommodate my children? They require considerable attention. I had assumed the position would include the twins, Dr. Winters replied. In fact, their presence would be an advantage. Many of my patients are mothers with young children who might feel more comfortable seeing your babies thriving under the same roof where they seek treatment. The offer seemed almost too perfect, raising Emma's suspicions. Forgive my directness, Doctor, but why would you extend such an opportunity to a complete stranger? His blue eyes held hers steadily. Qualified help is scarce in Riverdale. You're educated, obviously capable, and in need of a situation that accommodates your children. Our needs align. It was a practical answer, yet Emma sensed something unspoken beneath it. Still, she couldn't deny the position solved her most pressing concerns: shelter, income, and the ability to care for her children while working. I would need to consider your offer carefully, she said finally. Perhaps visit your home and office to better understand the duties involved. Of course, he agreed immediately. Would this afternoon be convenient? I have appointments until noon, but afterward I could show you the facilities. They arranged a time, and Dr. Winters departed shortly after, leaving Emma to face the curious gazes of Ruth and her boarders. She explained the doctor's proposal as simply as possible, downplaying its fortuitous timing. "Well," Mrs. Parsons exclaimed, when Emma finished, "that's Daniel for you, always seeing possibilities where others see problems." "It would be a respectable position," Mrs. Whitfield added approvingly, "and far better than accepting another marriage proposal out of desperation." "Judith!" Ruth scolded with a glance toward Emma. "Oh, I mean no offense, dear," Mrs. Whitfield said quickly, "but we all know why you came to Riverdale, and after Harper's shameful behavior—" She shook her head. "Better to establish yourself independently first. Marriage can wait until the right offer comes along." Despite her embarrassment at having her circumstances so openly discussed, Emma found wisdom in the older woman's words. Winter's offer provided breathing room, time to establish herself in Riverdale before making more permanent decisions about her future. That afternoon, Ruth offered to watch the twins while Emma visited Dr. Winter's practice. "They'll be fine. With me," she assured Emma, "and you'll think more clearly without them for an hour or two." Emma hadn't been separated from her babies since their birth, and the prospect both worried and relieved her. Worry won briefly, until Ruth demonstrated her obvious competence with infants, settling both twins in a cradle she'd had Ethan bring down from the attic. "My sister, Daniel's wife, had her babies in this," Ruth explained softly, as she gently rocked the cradle. "It's good to see it used again." This second reference to the doctor's family stirred Emma's curiosity further, but she refrained from prying. Instead, she thanked Ruth and set out for the doctor's office, located on Riverdale's Main Street just past the church. The building was larger than Emma expected, a well-maintained two-story structure with Dr. Daniel Winters, physician and surgeon, painted on a wooden sign above the door. A separate entrance at the side presumably led to the adjoining residence. The waiting room was empty when Emma entered, but a young woman looked up from a desk near a doorway that likely led to examination rooms. "Mrs. Mitchell?" the woman asked, rising. "I'm Nancy Cooper, Dr. Winters' nurse. He's just finishing with his last patient and asked me to make you comfortable." She gestured to a chair. "May I offer coffee while you wait?" "No, thank you," Emma replied, taking the offered seat and studying the waiting room. It was clean and orderly, with simple but comfortable furnishings. Medical texts lined bookshelves along one wall, while framed anatomical illustrations hung. On another, Everything spoke of competence and care. Nancy returned to her desk, organizing patient files with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Winters mentioned you might be joining our practice," she said conversationally. "We've needed help since Mrs. Bennett left to care for her ailing mother in Minnesota." "He's offered a position," Emma clarified, "though I haven't accepted. Yet I know little about medical practice." Nancy smiled reassuringly. "Most of the work involves organization and common sense, which Dr. Winters says teachers have in abundance. Medical knowledge comes with time." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Between us, it would be a relief to have another woman here. I'm only part-time since my husband farms, and some female patients prefer women present during examinations." Before Emma could respond, a door opened, and Dr. Winters appeared with an elderly man who was thanking him profusely for something. After seeing his patient out, the doctor turned to Emma. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I hope Nancy has made you welcome." "Very much so," Emma assured him, rising. "Good. I thought we might start with a tour of the office, then the residence, if that suits you." The tour was thorough and informative. The medical office consisted of 2 examination rooms, a small surgery, a dispensary for medicines, and a private consultation room. Dr. Winters explained the filing system, inventory, procedures for medical supplies, and the basic duties that would fall to Emma if she accepted the position. "I don't expect medical knowledge initially," he assured her. "That can be learned. What I need most is organization, attention to detail, and discretion. Patient confidentiality is sacred." "I understand," Emma said, impressed by the systematic way he ran his practice. "And the accommodations?" He led her through a door at the back of the office into a covered walkway connecting to the residence. The house was surprisingly large and well-appointed, clearly designed for a family much larger than a single man. A spacious kitchen with modern conveniences, a formal dining room, a comfortable parlor with well-stocked bookshelves, and upstairs, 4 bedrooms including a nursery, still furnished with a crib and small bed. Dr. Winters paused in the doorway of this room, his expression unreadable. "This would be suitable for your twins as they grow," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It has southern exposure, warm in winter, catches the breeze in summer." Emma walked to the window, noting the view of a small garden now dormant under snow. The nursery was cheerful despite its disuse, with faded circus animals painted along one wall and colourful quilts folded neatly at the foot of the small bed. This had been a room created with love, she realized, not merely furnished, but designed to delight its occupants. "It's perfect," she said softly, then turned to face him directly. "Dr. Winters, may I ask a personal question?" He seemed to brace himself, but nodded. "Your sister-in-law mentioned a cradle that belonged to your wife, and this nursery." She hesitated, unsure how to continue without causing pain. "You're wondering about my family," he finished for her. "It's a natural question, given I'm offering you residence in a home clearly built for children." He drew a deep breath. "My wife Elizabeth and our children, Samuel and Grace, died of scarlet fever 5 years ago. I was attending patients in outlying homesteads during a particularly harsh winter. By the time I returned," he left the sentence unfinished, the conclusion evident. "I'm so sorry," Emma said, understanding now the shadows she'd glimpsed in his eyes. "It was a difficult time," he acknowledged, his composure admirable despite the obvious pain. "For years, I maintained this house exactly as they left it. Recently, I've come to realize Elizabeth would have hated seeing rooms meant for living left unused out of grief." Emma nodded, moved by his honesty. "It's a beautiful home. Your wife had excellent taste." "She did," he agreed with the ghost of a smile. and a practical nature that would approve of its use by someone who needs it. He gestured toward the stairs. There's more to see if you wish, or we can discuss terms if you've seen enough. I believe I've seen what I need to, Emma replied. The position seems well suited to my situation, and the accommodation is more than generous. She paused, wanting to be completely transparent. I should mention that while I'm a quick learner, my experience with medical matters is limited to basic first aid and caring for my children through minor illnesses. As I said, medical knowledge can be acquired, Dr. Winters assured her. Nancy will assist with patient care until you're comfortable taking on those duties. Initially, I need someone to manage the office, prepare simple tinctures and remedies from established formulas, and maintain order in both house and practice. They proceeded to discuss specifics, hours, compensation, duties, and when Emma might begin. The terms were more than fair, offering security she hadn't dared hope for just 24 hours earlier. Yet beneath her gratitude lay an unsettling question. Was she accepting this position because it truly suited her, or because desperate circumstances left her no choice? As if sensing her internal conflict, Dr. Winters said quietly, "Take until tomorrow to consider, Mrs. Mitchell. This decision affects not only you, but your children. I wouldn't rush you into something of such consequence." His consideration touched her. How different from Oliver Harper's cold dismissal was this man's thoughtful respect for her autonomy, even knowing her precarious situation. "Thank you, Doctor. I shall give you my answer tomorrow." Emma extended her hand, which he took briefly in a formal handshake. "Regardless of my decision, your kindness has been unexpected." His eyes held hers for a moment. "Sometimes the journey we plan takes an unexpected turn, Mrs. Mitchell. In my experience, those detours often lead exactly where we need to go, though we couldn't have known it when we set out." As Emma walked back to the boarding house through the crisp afternoon air, his words echoed in her mind. Her carefully planned future with Oliver Harper had crumbled upon arrival, yet within 24 hours, another path had opened, one that offered independence rather than subservience, partnership rather than patronage. By the time she reached Ruth's porch, her decision was made. Emma's first week at Dr. Winters' practice passed in a blur of new routines and adjustments. She had accepted the position the morning after their tour, much to Ruth Winters' approval. By week's end, she and the twins were comfortably settled in the doctor's residence, occupying rooms unused since tragedy had emptied them 5 years prior. The early March weather remained stubbornly cold, but inside the doctor's home, warmth prevailed. Emma established a nursery in the cheerful room, with circus animals painted on the walls, arranging the twins' meager belongings alongside the toys and furnishings that had belonged to Samuel and Grace Winters. She had offered to store these mementos, but Dr. Winters had shaken his head. They were meant to be used, he'd said simply. Let them serve their purpose again. On this particular morning, Emma rose before dawn, as had become her habit. The twins still slept, their schedule gradually adjusting to the rhythms of the household. She dressed quickly in the practical navy skirt and white shirtwaist that had become her work uniform, then padded downstairs to prepare breakfast before the day's appointments began. She found Dr. Winters already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. He wore a crisp white shirt, his suit jacket and tie still hanging on the hook by the back door. "You're up early," she observed, reaching for the flour canister. She had discovered the doctor preferred biscuits to toast, a preference she was happy to accommodate given his generosity. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups and setting one on the table for her. "Henderson Farm sent word late last night. Mary's time is near, first baby." He sipped his coffee, watching as Emma efficiently mixed biscuit dough. "I thought I might ride out this morning to check on her." Emma nodded, cutting butter into the flour with practiced movements. "Will you be gone all day?" Depends on her progress. First babies often take their time. He hesitated. I've asked Nancy to come in, but she can only stay until noon. Her husband needs her help with a sick cow. I'll manage the office, Emma assured him, shaping the dough into rounds and placing them on a baking sheet. She had quickly mastered the filing system and basic office procedures, though she remained hesitant about medical matters. Should I reschedule afternoon appointments? Dr. Winters considered this. Only Mrs. Jenkins. She's coming for her monthly tonic for nerves. Nothing urgent. The others are mostly dressing changes and follow-ups I'd rather not postpone. Emma slid the biscuits into the oven, then joined him at the table, warming her hands around the coffee cup. I'll need instructions for the dressing changes. Simple ones only. I've noted the procedures in each patient file. His confidence in her abilities warmed her more than the coffee. You've learned quickly these past weeks. I've had an excellent teacher, she replied, then blushed slightly at his appreciative smile. Their morning routine had developed an easy familiarity that still surprised Emma. Dr. Winters breakfasted with her, then checked on the twins when they woke while she prepared bottles. He never seemed to mind the disruption they brought to his orderly bachelor existence. On the contrary, he often found excuses to interact with them, examining their developing skills with a doctor's eye, but also with genuine interest. This morning followed the pattern until a knock at the back door signaled the arrival of Ethan Winters, Ruth's son, who had come to drive the doctor to the Henderson farm. I'll likely return by supper, Dr. Winters told Emma as he gathered his medical bag and heavy coat. Send word with Ethan if any emergencies arise. After his departure, Emma settled into the day's tasks. The twins cooperated by napping longer than usual, allowing her to organize patient files and prepare the examination rooms before Nancy Cooper arrived to assist with morning appointments. You're a natural at this, Nancy commented as they worked. The older woman had initially seemed wary of Emma, perhaps concerned about being replaced, but had warmed considerably upon realizing Emma had no desire to usurp her position. Most take months to learn what you've mastered in weeks. Teaching requires organization, Emma replied, labeling newly prepared tinctures of willow bark for fever and chamomile for digestive complaints. And raising twins demands efficiency. Nancy laughed, checking the supply of clean bandages. True enough. Speaking of the little ones, they're thriving here. Some whispered you might not manage both work and motherhood, but you've proven them. Wrong. Emma stiffened slightly. Some meaning Olivia Harper, I presume. Nancy had the grace to look embarrassed. Gossip travels in small towns. Olivia Harper was quite vocal about her brother's disappointment. I imagine she was, Emma said, dryly. She had encountered Oliver Harper's sister only once since her arrival, at Sunday services, where the woman had pointedly avoided introducing her to the church's social circle. The rejection had stung, though Emma pretended indifference. Pay her no mind, Nancy advised. The Harpers fancy themselves Riverdale royalty since their family founded the Mercantile 30 years ago, but Dr. Winters has more respect in this town than all the Harpers combined. The morning passed with a steady stream of patients, a rancher with a deep cut from mending fences, a child with an ear infection, an expectant mother seeking reassurance about her advancing pregnancy. Nancy handled most medical aspects, while Emma managed records, payments, and dispensing prescribed remedies. At noon, Nancy departed regretfully. I'd stay if I could, but Thomas is hopeless with sick animals. If I don't help, we'll lose a valuable milking cow. We'll manage, Emma assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence as the afternoon patients began arriving. The first two appointments proceeded smoothly. Both simple dressing changes that followed Dr. Winters' detailed instructions. Exactly, Emma was just beginning to relax when the bell above the office door jangled and Oliver Harper himself entered, supporting an ashen-faced young man whose right hand was wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. "My clerk," Harper announced without preamble, sliced his palm opening crates. "Where's Winters?" Emma straightened, refusing to be intimidated by the man who had so publicly humiliated her. "Dr. Winters is attending a birth at the Henderson farm. I can help or send for him if necessary." Harper's expression darkened with recognition as he properly looked at her for the first time. What are you doing here?" "Mrs. Mitchell is my assistant," came a deep voice from behind them. Dr. Winters stood in the doorway, his coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand, and fully qualified to assess whether a situation requires my immediate attention. Relief flooded Emma, followed quickly by concern. "The Henderson baby?" "Delivered safely an hour ago. Mother and daughter are doing well." His gaze shifted to the injured clerk. "Let's examine that hand." Harper withdrew as Dr. Winters took charge, leading the young man to an examination room. Emma followed with clean bandages and instruments, leaving the merchant standing awkwardly in the waiting area. The injury proved serious, but not life-threatening. A deep laceration requiring several stitches, but no damage to tendons or nerves. Emma assisted competently, handing instruments, preparing suture materials, and cleaning the wound as directed. The clerk, whose name was Thomas Nichols, remained stoic throughout the procedure, thanking them profusely once his hand was neatly bandaged. "You'll need to rest that hand for at least 3 days, Dr. Winters instructed. "No lifting, no writing, minimal movement. Mrs. Mitchell will prepare a tincture for pain." As Emma mixed the prescribed remedy, she overheard Harper's protests in the waiting room. 3 days without my clerk? Impossible. The spring shipments arrive tomorrow." "Infection is a greater threat than delayed inventory," Dr. Winters replied, firmly. "Unless you prefer to risk losing him permanently to blood poisoning." Emma handed the tincture to young Nichols, along with written instructions. 2 drops in water every 4 hours as needed for pain, she explained. Return in 3 days for Dr. Winters to examine the wound, sooner if you notice increased redness, swelling or fever. After the clerk departed, Harper lingered, his discomfort evident as he shifted his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, I owe you an apology." Emma froze in the act of recording the treatment in the patient ledger. Of all the things she had expected from Oliver Harper, an apology ranked least likely. "My behavior upon your arrival was ungentlemanly," he continued stiffly. "I've since learned that your letter explaining the children's existence did indeed arrive, but was misplaced by my sister during a bout of influenza. She found it last week among papers she had set aside while ill." Emma set down her pen carefully. "I see. Had I known about the twins from the beginning, I might have—" He stopped, perhaps realizing no version of that sentence improved his standing. "You might have what, Mr. Harper?" Emma's voice remained steady, despite the anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. "Rejected me by letter instead of in person. Saved us both the embarrassment of a public scene." Harper flushed. "I merely meant, I believe Mrs. Mitchell understands your meaning perfectly," Dr. Winters interrupted, his tone deceptively mild, though Emma noted the tension in his jaw. "Your apology is noted. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have other patients waiting." No other patients waited, in fact, but Harper didn't challenge the claim. With a stiff nod, he departed, the bell jangling discordantly in his wake. Silence stretched between them until Emma spoke. "Thank you for your timely return, Doctor." "Fortuitous timing," he agreed, removing his coat. "Though, from what I observed, you were handling Harper quite capably on your own." "Harper doesn't concern me," Emma replied, returning to her record-keeping, "though I admit I was relieved to have your expertise for his clerk's injury." A deep laceration requires more skill than I currently possess. Dr. Winters studied her for a moment, then made a decision. Perhaps it's time to expand your medical training beyond basic procedures. You've mastered the administrative aspects more quickly than I anticipated. Emma looked up in surprise. Would you teach me more advanced skills? If you're willing to learn, he replied. Your steady hands and attention to detail would serve you well in medical practice, and having another trained person in Riverdale would benefit the community, especially when I'm called away on distant cases. The offer stirred something in Emma that had lain dormant since her teaching days: intellectual curiosity, the satisfaction of mastering new knowledge. I would be honored to learn whatever you're willing to teach, she said sincerely. His expression warmed. We'll begin tomorrow then. Basic anatomy first, then common ailments and treatments. He glanced at the clock on the wall. For now, I believe it's time to check on your children. They've been remarkably quiet all afternoon, Emma started, realizing the twins had indeed slept much longer than usual. Together, they walked through the connecting passage to the residence, finding both babies awake, but contentedly babbling to each other in their crib. The sight of the normally active twins peacefully entertaining themselves brought a smile to Emma's face. They're becoming more aware of each other, Dr. Winters observed. An advantage of twins, built-in companionship. And double the mischief once they become mobile, Emma added, lifting Sarah, who immediately reached for the doctor's watch chain, a favorite fascination. He chuckled, not minding the small fingers, grasping the gold links. I suspect these two will keep us both on our toes in the coming months. The casual us sent an unexpected warmth through Emma. In the weeks since accepting the position, Dr. Winters had gradually shifted from formal employer to something approaching a friend. He respected her intelligence, valued her contributions to his practice, and most surprisingly, showed genuine interest in her children's development. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly as Emma prepared supper while Dr. Winters entertained the twins in the kitchen. He had fashioned a safe enclosure from a large wooden box lined with blankets, allowing them freedom to practice sitting up while containing their increasing attempts at mobility. Samuel used to escape every containment we devised, he remarked, helping James maintain his precarious balance. By 10 months he could scale barriers twice his height. Emma noted how naturally he now shared memories of his children, a stark change from the guarded silence of her first weeks. James shows similar determination, she replied. Sarah is more cautious, but equally persistent in her own way. Different temperaments from the beginning, Dr. Winters nodded. Grace was our thinker, observed everything carefully before attempting anything new. Samuel leaped first and considered consequences later, if at all. Emma smiled, stirring the beef stew, simmering on the stove. My brother William was the same, always rushing headlong into adventure. I was forever patching his scrapes and bruises. Your first medical experience? He asked, a teasing light in his eyes. I suppose it was, she laughed, though Will was a reluctant patient at best. Their conversation continued through supper, comfortable and unforced. Emma described her childhood in Pennsylvania, her years teaching at a small school in Philadelphia, her brief marriage to James Mitchell Sr. Dr. Winters shared stories of his medical training, his decision to practice in Dakota Territory rather than Boston, his courtship of Elizabeth Winters, who had followed him west despite her wealthy family's objections. She never regretted it, he said, a bittersweet smile crossing his features. Even during the harshest winters, the loneliest times when I was called away for days to remote homesteads, she maintained that our life here had meaning her Boston existence lacked. She sounds remarkable, Emma said gently. She was. He gazed, into the fire for a long moment, then visibly returned to the present. "As are you, Mrs. Mitchell. Few women would have shown your resilience in the face of Harper's rejection, let alone built a new life so quickly." "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Emma replied. "And I had help." She hesitated, then added softly, "Your kindness made all the difference." Their eyes met across the table, something unspoken passing between them. The moment lingered until Sarah broke it with a demanding cry for attention. As Emma tended to the twins' bedtime routine later that evening, her thoughts returned to that moment and the gradual transformation of her circumstances. 1 month ago, she had departed Philadelphia with little hope beyond securing basic survival for her children. She had arrived in Riverdale to rejection and seeming disaster. Yet somehow, she now found herself in a comfortable home with meaningful work, learning new skills under the guidance of a man who respected her intelligence and accepted, even welcomed, her children. Was this merely fortunate coincidence, she wondered, or something more deliberate? The question followed her into dreams, where Daniel Winter's blue eyes held promises she dared not interpret while awake. Morning brought a fresh perspective and new developments. Emma descended to the kitchen to find Dr. Winters already dressed for the day, a letter open before him at the breakfast table. "News?" she inquired, moving to prepare coffee. "From the Territorial Medical Board," he confirmed. "They're sending an inspector next month to evaluate rural practices. Standard procedure, but it means additional preparation." Emma nodded, mentally calculating what records would need organizing. "We'll be ready. With your help, certainly." He hesitated, then continued. "The inspector will expect a properly qualified assistant, someone with documented training." She paused, in measuring coffee grounds. "I have no formal medical training." "But you have education and intelligence," he countered. "And I have authority to train apprentices. With your permission, I'd like to register you officially as my medical apprentice. It would formalize the teaching I proposed yesterday." The offer startled her. "Are women permitted as medical apprentices?" "The territorial statutes don't specify gender requirements for apprenticeship," he replied. "Several female physicians practice in larger settlements farther east, all initially trained through similar arrangements." Emma considered the implications as she prepared breakfast. Medical apprenticeship represented a significant commitment beyond her current duties. More responsibility, more learning, perhaps eventually a professional identity beyond widow or mother. "This isn't an obligation," Dr. Winters added, sensing her hesitation. "Merely an opportunity if you wish to pursue it." Emma set a plate of eggs before him, her decision forming. "I accept, gratefully, though I expect the good people of Riverdale may have opinions about a woman in such a role." "Undoubtedly," he agreed with a wry smile, "but they'll adapt, as they have to your presence here. Results speak louder than prejudice in frontier medicine." As they finished breakfast, a knock at the office door signaled the day's first patient. Emma rose to answer it, her step lighter than it had been in months. The path ahead remained uncertain, with challenges she could only dimly foresee. But for the first time since being widowed, she faced the future with something beyond resignation, with genuine hope and purpose. Daniel Winters watched her go, a complex emotion crossing his features before he, too, rose to begin the day's work, not as solitary physician, but as mentor, and perhaps, in time, something more. Spring arrived in Dakota Territory with surprising swiftness, melting snow into muddy streets and coaxing tentative green shoots from the thawing earth. 2 months had passed since Emma's arrival in Riverdale, transforming her from rejected mail-order bride to respected medical apprentice, a transition that drew increasing attention as her new role became evident to the wider community. On this, Particular April morning, Emma moved efficiently through the doctor's office, preparing for the day's appointments, while Dr. Winters made house calls to several outlying farms. The twins, now 8 months old, played in their specially constructed enclosure in the corner of the office, a compromise that allowed Emma to work while keeping them under constant supervision. The bell above the door chimed, announcing the first patient of the day. Emma looked up, expecting Mrs. Holcomb, who was scheduled for a pregnancy examination. Instead, 3 women entered: Olivia Harper, sister to Oliver, flanked by Beatrice Campbell, wife of the bank manager, and Margaret Wilson, the mayor's wife. "Good morning, ladies." Emma greeted them with professional courtesy, though wariness tightened her shoulders. This unlikely delegation had never before graced the doctor's office as a group. "How may I assist you?" "We've come to see Dr. Winters," Olivia Harper announced, her pinched features conveying disapproval as her gaze traveled from Emma to the twins and back. "On a matter of community concern. The doctor is making house calls this morning," Emma replied, maintaining her composure. "He should return by noon. I'd be happy to schedule an appointment, or I can assist with minor medical concerns in his absence." Beatrice Campbell sniffed audibly. "This is precisely our concern, a woman presuming to provide medical care without proper training." Emma straightened, meeting their gazes directly. "I serve as Dr. Winters' apprentice, a position recognized by territorial statute. Any medical care I provide is under his direct supervision." "Apprentice?" Margaret Wilson exclaimed. "Women don't become doctors, Mrs. Mitchell. It's unnatural." "Several female physicians practice throughout the territory," Emma countered evenly. "Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell graduated from medical college nearly 30 years ago, opening the profession to qualified women." "Riverdale is not New York City," Olivia Harper interjected. "Our community has standards of propriety. A woman living, unchaperoned in a man's home, handling intimate medical matters. It creates talk." The implication was unmistakable. Heat rose in Emma's cheeks, but she refused to be intimidated. "My position here is entirely professional, Mrs. Harper. Dr. Winters provides separate living quarters for me and my children, as any reputable employer would." "Nevertheless," Beatrice Campbell continued, "we represent the Ladies' Aid Society, and we've come to express concern about the example this arrangement sets for impressionable young women in our community." Emma arched an eyebrow. "The example of a widowed mother supporting her children through respectable employment, or the example of a woman pursuing education to better serve her own community?" The women exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for direct confrontation. Margaret Wilson recovered first. "We merely suggest that conventional employment would be more appropriate. The school board is seeking a teacher's assistant. The position would better suit your prior experience and a woman's natural temperament. At half the compensation," Emma noted, "with no accommodation for my children during working hours. Your concern for my welfare is touching, but unnecessary." Before the conversation could continue, the door opened again, admitting Nancy Cooper and Ruth Winters, both carrying covered dishes. "We brought lunch," Ruth announced cheerfully, then paused, taking in the tense tableau. "Ladies, what a surprise to find you here. None of your family members have fallen ill, I hope." The shift in atmosphere was immediate and telling. Ruth Winters, as the doctor's sister-in-law and a respected founding resident of Riverdale, wielded considerable social influence that clearly matched or exceeded that of the current visitors. "We came to discuss a matter of community standards," Olivia Harper replied stiffly. How thoughtful. Ruth set her dish on a side table with deliberate calm. "Though I can't imagine what standards apply to medical care beyond competence and compassion, both of which my brother-in-law and Mrs. Mitchell provide in abundance. It's the arrangement that concerns us," Beatrice Campbell clarified, her confidence visibly weakening under Ruth's steady gaze. A young widow living in a bachelor's home, apprenticing in medicine. It's highly irregular. Ruth's expression hardened. Imperceptibly. So was typhoid fever taking half our children before Daniel established his practice here. So was women dying in childbirth before they had access to proper medical care. If irregular arrangements save lives, I'll champion them gladly over outdated proprieties. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by Sarah's babbling as she pulled herself to standing using the edge of her enclosure. The moment's tension dissipated as all eyes turned to the achievement. Several women, including Margaret Wilson, instinctively smiling at the baby's triumphant expression. 8 months and already standing, Nancy observed, moving to admire the twins. They're thriving under your care, Emma, and the office runs more smoothly than I've ever seen it. The subtle reinforcement of Emma's positive impact wasn't lost on the visitors. Olivia Harper adjusted her shawl, clearly recognizing that this confrontation wouldn't yield her desired outcome. We've expressed our concerns. The Ladies' Aid Society will be discussing this matter further at our next meeting. Splendid, Ruth replied pleasantly. I look forward to attending. As founding president, I've been remiss in my participation lately. The 3 women departed shortly thereafter, leaving Emma, Ruth, and Nancy in a moment of shared triumph that quickly dissolved into laughter once the door closed. Their faces when you mentioned being founding president, Nancy chuckled, as if they'd forgotten who established the society in the first place. Convenient memories, Ruth agreed, unpacking the lunch she'd brought. Fresh bread, sliced ham, and early spring greens from her cold frame. Though we shouldn't underestimate Olivia Harper's determination. She's never forgiven Daniel for choosing to marry my sister instead of her 20 years ago. Emma looked up in surprise from where she'd knelt to praise Sarah's new accomplishment. I hadn't realized there was history there. Ancient history, Ruth waved dismissively. But Olivia Harper's grudges, like others, collect china figurines. Your presence here, young, intelligent, clearly valued by Daniel, has rekindled her resentment. Dr. Winters and I maintain a strictly professional relationship, Emma felt compelled to clarify, though a warmth spread across her cheeks that suggested complexity beneath the statement. Ruth and Nancy exchanged knowing glances that Emma pretended not to notice. Professional or not, Nancy said practically, you've revitalized this practice. Patients who previously avoided medical care now come regularly, especially women and mothers with young children. And Daniel smiles again, Ruth added softly. That alone would earn you the undying enmity of Olivia Harper, who's spent 5 years offering comfort to the grieving widower without receiving so much as a second glance. This new understanding of the morning's confrontation left Emma unsettled throughout the afternoon. As she assisted patients, recorded treatments, and managed the increasingly busy office, her mind returned repeatedly to Ruth's casual mention of Dr. Winters smiling again, and the implication that she was somehow responsible. Did others in town share Olivia Harper's suspicions about her relationship with the doctor? The thought troubled her. Emma had built a new life, centered on independence and professional respect, far removed from her original purpose in coming to Riverdale. The last thing she wanted was speculation that undermined her hard-won position or complicated her working relationship with Daniel Winters. Yet she couldn't deny that the relationship had evolved beyond employer and employee. Their evenings often extended long after the twins were asleep, sharing medical texts or discussing interesting cases. He treated her more as colleague than servant, valuing her observations and encouraging her growing knowledge. And sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught expressions on his face that stirred feelings she'd believed buried with her husband. The doctor returned mid-afternoon, removing his coat and hat as he entered through the private entrance connecting the house to the office. Emma was examining a young child's rash, one of the minor ailments she now handled independently, but felt immediately aware of his presence in a way that confirmed her earlier concerns. "Mrs. Mitchell," he greeted her, his voice warming the professional address. "Anything requiring my attention?" "Several messages," she replied, completing her examination. "And Mrs. Cooper and Ruth brought lunch. There's plenty left if you're hungry." Once the young patient departed with salve for the rash and instructions for care, Emma briefed Dr. Winters on the morning's appointments and messages. She hesitated before mentioning the delegation's visit, unsure how to frame their concerns without creating awkwardness. He noticed her hesitation immediately. "Something else happened." "What is it?" "The Ladies' Aid Society sent representatives," Emma admitted. "Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Campbell, and Mrs. Wilson expressed concerns about the propriety of our working arrangement." His expression darkened. Olivia Harper's doing, no doubt. What precisely were these concerns? Emma smoothed her apron unnecessarily. "That a woman shouldn't practice medicine. That my living here sets a poor example. That our arrangement appears improper." "I see." His jaw tightened. "And your response?" "I explained that my position is professional and recognized by territorial statute." Ruth and Nancy arrived fortuitously and offered additional perspective. Emma managed a small smile. "I believe the delegation retreated in strategic disorder." Dr. Winters' tension visibly eased. "Ruth can be formidable when defending those she cares about." "She mentioned something interesting," Emma ventured, curiosity. "Overcoming caution, that Mrs. Harper once had expectations regarding you." He looked genuinely surprised. Then understanding dawned. "Ah, ancient history from before I met Elizabeth. Olivia's father suggested an arrangement between our families that never progressed beyond preliminary discussions." "I see," Emma replied, relieved by his dismissive tone, yet still troubled. "Nevertheless, I wouldn't want gossip to damage your standing in the community or the practice's reputation." Dr. Winters studied her for a long moment. "Are you concerned about your own reputation?" "Mrs. Mitchell or mine?" "Both," she admitted. "I've worked hard to establish myself here. You've given me opportunities I never imagined possible. I wouldn't want misperceptions to jeopardize either." His expression softened. "Emma," he said, using her given name for the first time, "frontier communities run on practical realities, not social niceties. Your work here speaks for itself. Anyone truly concerned about community welfare recognizes the value you bring to this practice." The use of her first name shifted something between them, an acknowledgement of connection beyond professional courtesy. Emma felt it like a physical change in the air, both welcome and unsettling. "Perhaps," she conceded, "but perception often overshadows reality, especially where women's reputations are concerned." "Then we address it directly," he decided, his tone turning brisk. "I've been invited to speak at this Sunday's church service about spring health precautions. I'll use the opportunity to formally introduce you as my registered medical apprentice. Public acknowledgement should quell the worst of the gossip." The solution was practical and sensible, exactly what she would expect from him. Emma nodded. Agreement, pushing aside the complicated feelings their conversation had stirred. Sunday arrived clear and unseasonably warm, drawing nearly the entire settlement to the white clapboard church at the end of Main Street. Emma sat beside Ruth in a pew near the front, the twins clean and presentable in their best clothes, though James fussed against the confinement of the formal setting. Reverend Thomas delivered a brief sermon on renewal and growth before introducing Dr. Winters to speak on seasonal health matters. Emma listened attentively as he discussed precautions against spring illnesses, proper nutrition after winter's limited diet, and the importance of cleaning water sources contaminated by snowmelt. "Finally," he concluded, "I wish to make a formal announcement regarding my medical practice. As many of you know, Mrs. Emma Mitchell has been assisting me these past 2 months, bringing welcome organization and additional care to our community. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Territorial Medical Board has approved Mrs. Mitchell's registration as an official medical apprentice under my supervision. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Emma kept her expression composed, despite feeling every eye upon her. This appointment recognizes Mrs. Mitchell's intelligence, dedication, and natural healing abilities, Dr. Winters continued. Riverdale will benefit greatly from having additional medical expertise, particularly for women's concerns and children's ailments. I hope you'll join me in congratulating her on this achievement. He gestured for Emma to stand. She did so reluctantly, balancing Sarah on her hip while Ruth held James. The congregation's response was mixed. Some applauded politely, others whispered behind raised hands, and a few, notably Olivia Harper and her companions, sat with stony expressions. Mrs. Mitchell will increasingly handle routine cases independently, Dr. Winters explained, allowing me to devote more time to serious conditions and distant homesteads where medical care has been limited. This arrangement expands medical services available to all residents of Riverdale and surrounding areas. His framing was masterful, Emma realized, positioning her role as community benefit rather than personal advancement, emphasizing practical advantages that even the most traditional residents would find difficult to dismiss. By the time they exited the church, several women had approached to congratulate her, including some who had previously kept their distance. "Well handled," Ruth murmured as they walked home for Sunday dinner. Daniel always did know how to manage public opinion when it mattered to him. The medical benefits are genuine, Emma pointed out. It's not merely a matter of impression. Of course, Ruth agreed. But make no mistake, my brother-in-law rarely makes public pronouncements unless something matters deeply to him. The implication lingered in Emma's mind throughout dinner and into the evening as she prepared for the coming week's appointments. If her position truly mattered deeply to Daniel Winters, beyond practical considerations, what did that suggest? About his feelings toward her? The question remained unanswered as Monday dawned bright and busy. Emma focused on work, pushing personal considerations aside as patient after patient arrived seeking treatment for various spring ailments. By mid-afternoon, she had independently handled a dozen minor cases, feeling growing confidence in her medical judgment. As the last scheduled patient departed, the office door opened again, admitting Oliver Harper. Emma straightened, surprised by his unexpected appearance. "Mr. Harper," she acknowledged coolly, "how may we assist you?" "I need to speak with Winters," he replied tersely. "Privately. Dr. Winters is performing a minor surgery. He should be finished shortly." Emma gestured to the waiting area. "You're welcome to wait." Harper remained standing, his expression unusually agitated. "I'll wait in his private office." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Emma countered firmly. "Patient records and confidential correspondence are kept there." Anger flashed across Harper's face. "You presume to dictate terms to me? You're nothing but a glorified nurse playing medicine, while living under a man's roof without the benefit of marriage. Don't overestimate your position in this town, Mrs. Mitchell." The attack was so unexpected and virulent that Emma momentarily lost her composure. She took a steadying breath before responding. "Your personal opinion of me is irrelevant, Mr. Harper. Office procedures apply equally to everyone, regardless of their standing in Riverdale." "We'll see about that," Harper muttered. "Things are changing. Your unnatural arrangement with Winters won't continue unchallenged." Before Emma could respond, Dr. Winters emerged from the surgery, removing blood-stained apron and washing his hands thoroughly at the basin. His expression darkened as he took in Harper's hostile stance and Emma's rigid posture. "Harper," he acknowledged curtly, "what brings you here?" "A matter requiring private discussion." Harper replied, regarding certain investments and community concerns. Dr. Winters dried his hands methodically. Mrs. Mitchell has my complete confidence. Anything you wish to discuss can be said in her presence. The merchant's jaw tightened. Very well. The town council met yesterday evening. There's a movement to enforce certain moral standards for businesses operating in Riverdale, particularly those serving vulnerable populations. Meaning? Dr. Winters prompted, though his expression suggested he already understood the implication. Meaning your living and working arrangements with Mrs. Mitchell have raised concerns about the propriety of your medical practice, Harper stated bluntly. Either formalize your relationship through marriage, replace her with a male assistant, or face the possibility of official censure from the council. Shock rendered Emma momentarily speechless. The ultimatum laid bare the extent of opposition to her position and the limited options for addressing it. Dr. Winters, however, appeared more angry than surprised. The council has no authority over medical licensure or practice. That falls under territorial jurisdiction. True, Harper conceded with a thin smile, but the council approves all business licenses within town limits. Your office operates under such a license, renewal due next month. The implicit threat hung in the air. Without a business license, Dr. Winters could continue practicing medicine, but would be forced to relocate his office outside town boundaries, a significant hardship for both him and his patients. Who exactly comprises this movement? Dr. Winters demanded. You and whoever else holds debt at your bank? Or is Blackwater Mining Company applying pressure again for my support of their clinic proposal? Harper's expression confirmed the accuracy of at least one assumption. Various concerned citizens share these views, including prominent church members, business leaders, and the Ladies' Aid Society. How convenient that moral outrage aligns so perfectly with business interests, Dr. Winters observed coldly. The council meets next Friday, correct? I'll address these concerns formally at that time. As is your right, Harper acknowledged. But be prepared for public discussion of matters you might prefer kept private. His gaze shifted meaningfully to Emma before he departed, leaving tension thick in his wake. When the door closed behind him, Emma finally found her voice. I'm so sorry. I never intended to create such difficulties for you or the practice. You've created nothing, Dr. Winters replied firmly. This is about control, not morality. Harper's never forgiven me for purchasing the land he wanted for expansion 20 years ago. The Blackwater situation merely adds current motivation to old grudges. Emma shook her head, unconvinced. Nevertheless, your practice shouldn't suffer because of my presence. Perhaps I should— Don't, he interrupted, his voice softening as he moved closer. Don't suggest leaving, Emma. Whatever Harper and his allies attempt, we'll face it together. The conviction in his voice steadied her, but the merchant's ultimatum echoed in her mind. Either formalize your relationship through marriage, replace her with a male assistant, or face official censure. The options felt equally impossible, and the coming confrontation unavoidable. The week leading up to the town council meeting passed. In a storm of activity, word of Oliver Harper's ultimatum spread through Riverdale with the speed of prairie fire, dividing the community into factions. While Emma maintained professional composure during office hours, privately she battled waves of anxiety about the impending confrontation and its potential consequences. On Thursday afternoon, as the last patient departed, Emma closed the office ledger with uncharacteristic force. "This is absurd," she declared, turning to Dr. Winters, who was organizing surgical instruments in the adjacent room. "The council meeting tomorrow will be about me, not the practice. My presence is causing division in a community that accepted you without question for 20 years. Dr. Winters looked up, his expression somber. "This isn't about you, Emma. It's about power and who wields it in Riverdale. Harper and his allies are using our arrangement as convenient leverage for broader aims. Nevertheless, I'm the leverage. They're using, she countered, moving to stand in the doorway. I've been thinking about Ruth's offer, his brow furrowed. What offer? To manage her boarding house while she visits her daughter in St. Paul this summer. The position includes accommodation for me and the twins. Emma's voice remained steady, despite the tightness in her chest. It would eliminate the immediate pretext for opposition to your practice. Dr. Winters set down the instruments with deliberate care. For a long moment he remained silent, his back to her, as he seemingly studied the contents of the medical cabinet. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Is that what you want, Emma? To abandon your medical training? To retreat into conventional women's work because a few small-minded individuals object to your advancement? Of course not, she replied, stung by his characterization. I found purpose and fulfillment in this work that I never imagined possible, but I won't be the cause of destroying what you've built here. He turned then, crossing the distance, between them with purposeful strides. You've become essential to what we're building here, not just to the practice, but to the community's health. Every woman who brings her children to you, rather than suffering in silence. Every expectant mother who receives proper care because she trusts you. They matter more than Harper's machinations. The intensity in his blue eyes held her immobile. They stood barely a foot apart, closer than propriety would strictly allow. Close enough that Emma could detect the faint scent of the carbolic soap he used after examinations. Daniel, she said softly, using his given name for the first time. I don't want to leave, but I see no acceptable alternative. His expression shifted at the sound of his name on her lips. There is another option, he said, voice dropping to match her quiet tone. One I've considered for weeks, but hesitated to propose for fear of appearing to take advantage of your situation. Emma's pulse quickened as she grasped his meaning. Marriage, she whispered. Yes. His gaze remained steady on hers, not as Harper's ultimatum demands, but as a partnership of equals. Your medical apprenticeship would continue, your children would have stability, and together we could build something meaningful here in Riverdale. A marriage of convenience, Emma stated, needing clarity despite the sudden hollowness in her chest. No, Daniel shook his head firmly. A marriage of choice, of mutual respect, of... He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. Growing affection, at least on my part. The admission hung between them, altering the atmosphere. As surely as storm clouds transform a summer sky, Emma struggled to form a response, her carefully maintained composure fragmenting under the weight of his words and her own conflicted emotions. I need time, she finally managed. This is unexpected. Understanding crossed his features as he stepped back, restoring the proper distance between them. Of course, take whatever time you need. My proposal stands independent of tomorrow's council meeting, which I'll handle regardless of your decision. Emma nodded gratefully, though confusion still clouded her thoughts. I should check on the twins, she murmured, retreating toward the connecting passage to their living quarters. Emma, Daniel called softly as she reached the door. She paused without turning. Whatever you decide, your position here is secure. I'll contest any attempt to separate you from the work you've come to love. His promise followed her through the evening as she tended to the twins, prepared dinner, and moved through the domestic routines that punctuated her days. After the children were asleep, she sat alone in the small sitting room adjoining her. Bedroom, a medical text open but unread in her lap. Marriage to Daniel Winters. The prospect simultaneously terrified and attracted her. Their professional partnership had evolved into genuine friendship over the past months. She respected his intelligence, admired his dedication to his patients, appreciated his acceptance of her children. But marriage meant vulnerability of a different kind, opening herself to potential heartbreak should his growing affection prove insufficient foundation for lifelong commitment. Her first marriage, though brief, had been built on romantic love. James Mitchell had courted her properly, won her heart with poetry and promises, created a vision of their future that included children and companionship. His death had shattered that vision, leaving Emma to navigate widowhood and motherhood simultaneously. Would marriage to Daniel offer security without love? Or could respect and shared purpose evolve into deeper attachment? And did she even want that possibility, with the risk of loss it inevitably carried? Sleep eluded her long, into the night as she weighed options and examined her own conflicted heart. Dawn found her still undecided, but determined to face the council meeting with dignity, regardless of personal turmoil. Friday dawned bright and unseasonably warm for late April. Emma dressed with particular care in her best navy dress with white collar and cuffs, her honey-brown hair arranged in a simple but elegant knot. The outfit projected capability and respectability, qualities she would need in abundance at the afternoon's confrontation. The morning passed in a blur of patience and preparations. Daniel was unusually quiet, respecting her need for space to consider his proposal. Ruth arrived shortly before noon to watch the twins during the meeting, greeting Emma with a worried smile. "Half the town will be there," she informed them over a hasty lunch. "Harper's been rallying supporters all week, but you have allies too. Every woman you've treated is speaking in your defense." "I appreciate their support," Emma replied, "though I regret putting them in the position of opposing established authorities." Ruth snorted indelicately. "Established authorities need opposing when they overstep. Oliver Harper may own the largest store in town, but that doesn't give him the right to dictate how people live or work." At precisely 2 o'clock, Emma and Daniel entered Riverdale's town hall, a modest building adjacent to the church. The meeting room was already filled to capacity, townspeople packed onto wooden benches with barely room to shift position. A raised platform at the front held a long table where the 5 council members sat with varying expressions of discomfort or determination. Mayor Wilson occupied the center position, flanked by Oliver Harper and bank manager William Campbell. On one side, blacksmith Joseph Miller and farmer Elias Thompson on the other. The composition suggested a divided council, 2 merchants aligned with Harper's interests, 2 working men who might prove more sympathetic to practical considerations. Emma and Daniel found seats near the front, courtesy of Nancy Cooper, who had saved places for them. As they settled, Emma felt dozens of gazes upon them, some supportive, others openly hostile. Olivia Harper, seated prominently in the front row opposite them, made no attempt to hide her contemptuous scrutiny. Mayor Wilson called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. "We gather to address concerns raised regarding certain business practices within town limits," he began diplomatically. "Specifically, whether particular arrangements at Dr. Winters's medical practice meet community standards expected of Riverdale establishments." "Speak plainly, Wilson," Harper interrupted. "The issue is whether a woman with no medical credentials should be permitted to practice medicine while living unchaperoned in a bachelor's home. It's a matter of public health and public morality." Daniel rose immediately, his composure unwavering despite the provocation. "If we're speaking plainly, let's acknowledge what this is really about. Mrs. Mitchell is formally registered with the Territorial Medical Board as my apprentice, a legal position, recognized throughout Dakota Territory. Her presence in my household is as a respected employee with separate living quarters." "Separate quarters under the same roof," Campbell interjected, "which creates the appearance of impropriety regardless of actual arrangements." "I wasn't aware. The council regulated appearances rather than actions," Daniel countered evenly. Mrs. Mitchell's character is beyond reproach. Her work has substantially improved medical care available to this community, particularly for women and children who previously suffered in silence rather than consult a male physician. Emma maintained a dignified expression despite her discomfort, at being discussed as though absent. Around the room, she noted several women nodding agreement with Daniel's assessment, mothers whose children she had treated, expectant women she had guided through pregnancy complications. No one questions Mrs. Mitchell's technical competence, Harper stated dismissively. The issue is propriety. Riverdale businesses must maintain standards that reflect our community values. A woman living in a man's household without the benefit of marriage or family relationship violates those standards. Does it indeed? The new voice came from Ruth Winters, who had risen from her seat near the back. If so, I must be violating standards as well, housing single men and women under one roof at my boarding house. That's different, Olivia Harper objected immediately. Boarding houses have established protocols and separate facilities. As does my brother-in-law's residence, Ruth countered. The real difference is that Emma Mitchell threatens certain people's assumptions about women's proper place. The exchange ignited a wave of comments from the assembled crowd, voices rising as people took sides. Mayor Wilson banged his gavel repeatedly, struggling to restore order. In the momentary lull that followed, Emma made her decision. She stood, smoothing her skirts with steady hands before addressing the council directly. Gentlemen, if I may speak on my own behalf. Mayor Wilson nodded, relief evident in his expression at having someone new take the floor. Proceed, Mrs. Mitchell. Emma surveyed the room, drawing strength from the supportive faces among the hostile ones. I came to Riverdale as a widow with infant twins, seeking security through marriage to Mr. Oliver Harper, who had advertised for a bride in Eastern newspapers. A ripple of reaction passed through the crowd at this direct reference to her initial rejection. Oliver Harper's face darkened, but Emma continued undeterred. Upon arrival, I found my circumstance misunderstood and my children unwelcome. When that arrangement failed, Dr. Winters offered employment that recognized my educational background and provided accommodation suitable for a woman with young children. Her steady gaze moved from face to face among the council members. During these past 3 months, I have assisted with dozens of medical cases, maintained precise records of treatments and outcomes, and studied extensively to increase my knowledge of modern medical practice. Women who previously avoided treatment now seek care regularly. Children receive prompt attention for injuries and illnesses. Emma paused, drawing a deep breath before continuing with measured certainty. I understand concerns about appearances. Propriety matters in close communities. But surely substance matters more than appearance. The question before you isn't whether our arrangement looks conventional, but whether it serves the greater good of Riverdale's citizens. The silence that followed her statement felt charged with possibility. She remained standing, shoulders straight, gaze steady, presenting herself not as a woman seeking approval, but as a professional defending her right to serve. Blacksmith. Joseph Miller broke the silence, addressing his fellow council members. My wife, Mary, wouldn't be alive without Mrs. Mitchell's quick thinking when she hemorrhaged after our last baby came. Doc Winters was 10 miles away at Jensen Place. Mrs. Mitchell knew exactly what to do, saved Mary's life before he could even get there. His weathered face hardened as he looked at Harper. I don't much care about appearances when weighed against my wife's life. Farmer Thompson nodded agreement. My Abigail won't see any doctor but Mrs. Mitchell for her female complaints. Says she suffered for years before having someone she could speak to openly. Mayor Wilson, sensing the council's division and the community sentiment, attempted compromise. Perhaps a formal chaperoning arrangement could address the propriety concerns while allowing Mrs. Mitchell's valuable work to continue. Or perhaps, Daniel said, rising to stand beside Emma, a more permanent solution is appropriate. He turned to face her directly, taking her hands in his. Emma Mitchell, I intended a more private setting for this, but circumstances demand directness. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, partner in life, as you've become partner in my practice? Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Emma's eyes widened at the public proposal, so different from their private discussion. Yet as she looked into Daniel's face, she saw not calculation, but genuine emotion, affection, respect, and something deeper that stirred answering feelings in her own heart. In that moment of connection, her doubts dissolved like morning mist under Dakota sunshine. This was no marriage of convenience or strategic alliance, but the natural culmination of a relationship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and growing attachment that she now recognized had matured into love on both sides. Yes, she replied with quiet certainty, I will. The simple acceptance transformed the atmosphere instantly. Applause broke out from supporters, while even critics appeared mollified by the prospect of convention being satisfied. Only Olivia Harper maintained her stony expression, rising abruptly to exit the hall with dramatic indignation. Mayor Wilson seized the opportunity to conclude the contentious meeting. Well, it appears concerns about propriety will be addressed through the most traditional means possible. Unless there are objections, I propose we consider this matter resolved and move to regularly scheduled business. As the meeting shifted to mundane town matters, Emma and Daniel slipped outside into the afternoon sunshine, still holding hands as they walked slowly toward home. That was quite a performance, Emma said when they were beyond earshot of the hall. Though I can't help wondering if you felt pressured by circumstances to make such a public declaration. Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The public setting was expedient, I admit, but the sentiment behind it was entirely genuine. His eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. I've known since you stood up to Harper in my office, that first day, that you were a woman of exceptional character. What I couldn't have anticipated was how completely you would transform not just my practice, but my life. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I came to Riverdale seeking security, expecting to sacrifice independence for stability. Instead, I found a partnership I never imagined possible, professional and personal. Is that yes, under less dramatic circumstances? Daniel asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his calm exterior. In answer, Emma rose on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his cheek, her first such gesture, shocking in its public setting yet perfect in its timing. It's a yes without reservation or condition, she confirmed softly. Not for appearance or convenience, but because I've discovered that the heart can heal and open again to possibilities I thought forever lost. Their return to the doctor's residence, soon to be their shared home in truth as well as appearance, was accompanied by congratulatory calls from neighbors and patients who had witnessed the proposal. Ruth greeted them at the door, her knowing smile suggesting she had anticipated this outcome long before either of them had recognized its inevitability. Inside, the twins babbled happily in their play area, unaware that their world had just shifted, axis once again. James pulled himself up on unsteady legs, reaching toward Daniel with complete trust in his chubby hands. Sarah watched her brother with calculating eyes, clearly planning her own approach to mobility. As Emma observed Daniel lifting James with practiced ease, his expression one of genuine affection rather than obligation, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From rejected mail-order bride to respected medical apprentice, to future wife and partner, each apparent setback revealing itself as a step toward unexpected happiness. We'll need to write to the medical board, Daniel said pragmatically, though his eyes remained soft as he bounced James gently. Your apprenticeship status changes somewhat as my wife, but there are precedents for husband-wife medical practices throughout the territory. Practical considerations already, Emma teased, lifting Sarah as the little girl demanded equal attention. We've been engaged for less than an hour. Professional and personal, Daniel replied with a smile that transformed his serious features. That's our partnership, isn't it? In all aspects of life. The simple truth of his statement settled over Emma like a benediction. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from Harper's continued opposition to the everyday difficulties of frontier medicine, they would face them together. Their unexpected family forged, not from conventional beginnings, but from mutual respect, shared purpose and love that had bloomed in the most unlikely soil. The Riverdale church had never looked more beautiful than on this early June morning. Wildflowers gathered from the surrounding prairie filled simple mason jars along the pews, their vibrant colors standing bright against the whitewashed walls. Sunlight streamed through windows thrown open to catch the gentle breeze, carrying the sweet scent of early summer across the gathered congregation. Emma stood in the small antechamber, Ruth Winters making final adjustments to her dress. Ivory, silk that had once belonged to Elizabeth Winters, carefully altered to fit Emma's slighter frame. The past 6 weeks since the town council meeting had passed in a whirlwind of preparation, both for the wedding and for the expansion of the medical practice that would follow. Elizabeth would be pleased, Ruth said softly, smoothing the delicate lace at the collar. She always hoped Daniel would find happiness again. I wish I could have known her, Emma replied, touching the cameo brooch Ruth had insisted she wear, a family heirloom passing from one winter's bride to the next. From everything you've shared, we would have been friends. Ruth blinked rapidly, controlling emotion with practiced dignity. Sisters, more likely. You share her practical nature and her unwillingness to accept arbitrary limitations. She stepped back to assess the final effect. Perfect. Now are the twins ready for their grand entrance? Emma smiled, glancing to where 10-month-old Sarah and James sat in matching outfits, unusually clean and presentable thanks to Ruth's careful preparations. Both babies had begun crawling with determination, James slightly ahead in motor skills, while Sarah excelled in verbal development. They would participate in the ceremony in their own way, carried by Ruth and Nancy as honorary attendants. As ready as they'll ever be, Emma replied, though I suspect James will attempt to escape. The moment the ceremony begins. Ethan is prepared for interception, Ruth assured her with a chuckle. That boy has grown remarkably nimble since your children arrived. A gentle knock at the door announced Reverend Thomas, his kind face appearing around the edge as he entered. It's time, Mrs. Mitchell. Dr. Winters appears to be wearing a groove in the floorboards with his pacing. Emma took a deep, steadying breath. Unlike her first wedding, a small, solemn affair overshadowed by wartime anxieties, this ceremony represented not desperate hope, but confident certainty. She had come to know Daniel Winters through daily interaction, professional partnership, and quiet evenings of conversation. Their foundation was built not on romantic illusion, but on mutual respect, shared purpose and affection that had deepened into love through time and understanding. I'm ready, she said, gathering her simple bouquet of prairie roses. The small church had filled to capacity, townspeople crowding the pews in their Sunday finest. Emma noted with satisfaction that the attendance included not just supporters, but former critics as well, all save Olivia Harper, whose conspicuous absence surprised no one. Even Oliver Harper sat in a back pew, his expression unreadable, but his presence a tacit acknowledgement that Riverdale had accepted this unconventional union. Daniel waited at the altar, tall and distinguished in his best black suit, his normally serious expression transformed by barely contained joy as Emma proceeded slowly down the aisle. Behind her came Ruth carrying Sarah and Nancy with James, both babies wide-eyed at the unusual gathering. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Traditional vows, spoken with quiet conviction by both bride and groom. When Reverend Thomas invited Daniel to kiss his bride, the gentle touch of his lips against hers felt like both culmination and beginning, closing one chapter of their story while opening another, filled with promise. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, James broke free from Nancy's arms, crawling with remarkable speed toward his mother and new stepfather. The laughter that rippled through the assembly dispelled any remaining formality as Daniel scooped up the determined infant, including him in their first moments as a family. The celebration continued at the doctor's residence, now officially the Winters family home, where tables had been set up in the garden for a community feast. Women from across Riverdale had contributed dishes, creating a spread that represented the town's diverse cultural heritage. Children played games on the lawn while adults mingled, conversations flowing more easily across social boundaries than ever before. Emma found herself continuously surrounded by well-wishers, many expressing genuine gratitude for her medical work. Mrs. Blackwell, whose difficult pregnancy Emma had monitored with particular care, proudly displayed her healthy 2-month-old daughter. Farmers' wives, who had previously suffered in silence, with women's complaints, pressed her hands and whispered thanks for discreet treatments that had improved their quality of life. Even Mayor Wilson's wife, once part of the opposition delegation, approached with grudging respect. "I may have misjudged your intentions, Mrs. Winters," she acknowledged stiffly. "Your care for my granddaughter's scarlet fever was exemplary. Professional intentions often transcend personal differences," Emma replied diplomatically. "I'm gratified your granddaughter recovered fully." As afternoon mellowed toward evening, the gathering gradually diminished as families with young children departed for home. Daniel found Emma sitting on the garden bench, observing Ruth supervising the twins' interaction with other children. "Happy?" he asked, joining her with 2 glasses of Mrs. Henderson's renowned elderberry wine. "Completely," Emma confirmed, accepting the glass and leaning slightly against his shoulder, though I confessed to some trepidation about tomorrow. Tomorrow would bring significant changes to their professional lives. With their marriage official, Emma's status would shift from apprentice to partner in the practice. The territorial medical supervisor was scheduled to visit, formalizing her expanded role and approving new credentials that would allow her to treat patients independently while continuing her medical education. "Dr. Reynolds is progressive in his views," Daniel assured her. "He supervised a husband-wife practice in Bismarck for years before accepting the territorial position. Your qualifications speak for themselves." Emma sipped her wine thoughtfully. "It's not just the inspection. The arrival of Dr. Bennett next month means even greater changes to our practice. The recruitment of young Dr. Thomas Bennett, recently graduated from medical school in Chicago, had been Daniel's inspiration. The new physician would manage routine cases in town, freeing Daniel to establish regular circuits to outlying homesteads and mining camps where medical care had been sporadic at best. Emma would focus increasingly on women's and children's medicine, creating a specialized practice unique in the territory. "Change brings opportunity," Daniel reminded her, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Bennett's presence means expanded care for the entire region while allowing us more predictable schedules." "And time for our family," Emma added softly, her gaze finding the twins, who were now drowsing on a blanket under Ruth's watchful eye. "They're growing so quickly." Daniel followed her gaze, his expression softening into tenderness she had come to cherish. James has my medical texts memorized by location, if not content. He reorganized my reference shelf yesterday while I wasn't looking. Emma laughed. While Sarah has apparently appointed herself record keeper, I found her with the patient ledger. This morning, making very serious marks with a pencil stub she must have found under your desk. Medical inclinations already, Daniel observed with evident pride, though I suspect they'll forge their own paths when the time comes.